Good afternoon and welcome to CompanyRoots. Today we're interviewing Professor Michael Platt, a professor of neuroscience, psychology, and marketing at the University of Pennsylvania, whose work specifically focuses on the biological mechanisms that underlie the brain's decision-making process in social environments. This area of study has a connection to improving health and welfare in societies across the globe.
Professor Platt is also the director of the Wharton Neuroscience Initiative. His research has been supported by the National Foundation and the Department of Defense and has also been featured in the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. It's a privilege and we are truly honored to interview you today. My name is Sarish Jasti and I'm going to be a rising freshman at the Wharton School, and I'm from Homedale, New Jersey, and I'm the founder of CompanyRoots.
And my name is Raul Kawuru, and I'm a rising junior at St. Paul School in New Hampshire, and I'm the president of CompanyRoots. So the first question that we always ask is, what are your company roots and how do they help you in shaping your ideas and becoming the person you are today?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to speak with you both. I'm really impressed with what you're doing. My company roots are kind of a little different, I think, especially from folks in a business school. I grew up outside Cleveland, Ohio. I went to public school, but then when I went to college, and I was really the first person in my family to go to college, I studied anthropology for my undergraduate degree, and then I also got my PhD in anthropology as well. So I don't have any real paper credentials in neuroscience, psychology, or marketing.
Yeah.
But after my PhD, I went on to NYU to do a postdoctoral fellowship in neuroscience, and then have been kind of pulling together the various strands of those different disciplines over the last 20 years.
Mm-hmm. Right. So for our viewers who might not know too much about your work, can you briefly explain what you do and why it's important to you?
Yeah, I mean, our work is now highly varied, but at its core, it's about trying to understand really human nature. So why do we do the things we do? Why do we make the decisions that we make? What makes one person, take one kind of decision and somebody else a different kind of decision in the same context? And how do those processes and how does that variation amongst people relate to the kinds of problems other animals face in their environments? And how can we use that understanding to help people who might have challenges in decision making, or in particular in social interaction? Can we use that knowledge to help develop therapies or other kinds of interventions that can help them out? And since moving to Penn and Wharton, a lot of my time has been and my energy has been devoted to trying to take that knowledge and kind of flip it around 180 degrees and say, not only how can we help people who might have clinical problems, but can we take the same sorts of knowledge and approaches and say, help people to make better business decisions? And so that's where we've been, which is wide open, and of course all businesses run on brains. And so if we can understand brains a little bit better, perhaps we can understand how to do business better.
Yeah. So as you mentioned before, how have a bachelor's degree from Yale in anthropology and a PhD from UPenn in psychology help shape your decision-making when teaching, and also your decision-making when creating and developing your research projects?
Yeah, I mean, I really went into anthropology because it's the broadest of all disciplines for understanding human nature. So you basically come at the question from the biological perspective, but also cultural, evolutionary, and historical. So, I think that's a very firm foundation that provides, I think at its core, just an understanding of of kind of what people are like, and what seems to be the core of being a human being, and also what differs amongst different human cultures. And so that was sort of, I think, for me, the foundation of the questions that I have chosen to focus on. But it was really important to go through psychology and neuroscience to provide the experimental and technical expertise to ask those questions in a really rigorous way. So that's kind of how all of that has come together to inform the work that I do.
Yeah. So, why do you feel that neuroscience inspires out-of-the-box ideas, and what is the best way for you to market and present these ideas?
Yeah, those are really interesting questions. I mean, I think for one thing, neuroscience allows us to take a peek under the hood.
Hmm.
So without neuroscience, we are left, for the most part, looking at people's observable behavior and asking them questions to which they respond. And observable behavior can be the product of many different kinds of forces that are going on in your brain and your body,
Hmm.
and which are not visible unless you have tools for actually making them visible. And what people say in terms of what they think was driving a certain decision or what they want or what they like
Hmm.
um, is often inaccurate in terms of what's going on in their heads because honestly, we don't have very good access, conscious access to those processes. And even if we do, we can be subtly influenced just by the way a question is asked or the very fact that somebody is asking us a question. And sometimes we just don't want to reveal, even if we do
Yeah.
know. So those are, I think, a number of reasons why neuroscience can provoke some out-of-the-box ideas, because once you get an insight into what is actually the foundation for a particular decision process or let's say creativity or something like that, that can perhaps help you to connect the dots and develop a new way of doing things. So I think that's one way. I think marketing, marketing it is both ridiculously easy and also very challenging. So ridiculously easy in the sense that everybody's interested in the brain. No matter what every discovery we make, every time, we begin to talk about neuroscience, people are just, thrilled, they're excited, they want to know what's going on in their heads or in
Yeah.
the heads of their customers or their employees. But on the other hand, especially when you're talking to people in the business world, and I've spent the last 4 years teaching MBA students and undergraduates and people, practitioners in industry, and what they want to know is, yeah, it's great that this is super interesting, but tell me how to make it practical. So how can I use this right now? And in some cases, there is a direct answer to that. So, for example, in marketing, I can tell you if you're essentially doing A/B testing with focus groups and you're not collecting neuroscience data, you're leaving all this data on the floor that honestly at this point is cheap and easy to use,
Yeah.
and you will get return on investment. I guarantee it by including it. But other areas, I think, that sort of obvious lift is just beginning to emerge. So, and in many cases, we are now doing the studies that show that by taking a neuroscience-inspired approach or by collecting neuroscience data, we can, I don't know, for example, do management better. So we can
Yeah.
make better hiring decisions in terms of matching an individual's talents, traits, and motivators to the particular job that they might need to do. Or, for example, a lot of our work has been focused on teamwork. So how do we create teams of people that develop trust rapidly and can work together seamlessly? And can we use neuroscience to help kind of push that process along more quickly and more effectively?
Hmm. Yeah. So, one of the reasons I kind of chose Penn was because it bridges the divide between different departments. So, being a student in one school, I can take classes in any of the other schools. And so you kind of do that as a Penn integrates knowledge professor. You go between all of Penn schools and you teach in different departments too, like neuroscience, marketing, and psychology. So, as a teacher, how do you put your personal touch in like bridging these departments and including them in your Wharton classes or for people in the School of Arts and Sciences for them too?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question. Certainly, what I'm doing is a bit out of the box. And
Yeah.
when I first, developed a course for Wharton called Introduction to Brain Science for Business, I mean, there really wasn't a course like that. Certainly not here, and I don't think anywhere. And really that meant, I mean, it was ultimate freedom. I could,
Yeah.
could put whatever I wanted into it. So really what I do is cover all of the areas that are interesting to me and that I think, from my perspective, are directly applicable, ties of neuroscience to business. I teach a seminar called Being Human for the psychology department, and that's been fascinating too because it allows me to, in my own way, examine all the different things about people that have been considered at one time or another to be uniquely human, whether that's economic behavior or aesthetics or creativity or theory of mind, reading, writing, all that kind of stuff, language. So those topics are so big, right, that they admit a lot of different perspectives. They're the topics that people have been wrestling with for thousands of years.
Yeah.
And you have to be very, that what that means is that when I teach a seminar, I as well as my other class, I don't have any prerequisites, and I accept and encourage students from any major, any background. So in my seminar, I get students from not only from psychology or from biological basis behavior, which is now called neuroscience, marketing, but I get students from fine arts. I get students from the nursing school. I get students from the veterinary school. I get students from all over, computer science. And that creates a really interesting mix and dynamic in the classroom because everybody does have such very different perspectives, and that, it makes it very enjoyable for me.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So you have published and worked through countless research projects. So when you review students and other people to work side by side with you, what do you consider them on, especially since you work with different students from various departments?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, I have, in terms of undergraduates, I've mentored more than 100, even here since coming to Penn 5 years ago. So lots of students have come through the lab. Yeah, it's a great question. I look for people who have energy, who are passionate, who have creativity. It's great if they have some background or expertise in lab work or whatever, but I mean, that's not really what I'm typically looking for. I'm looking for somebody who really, really, they're just super excited. This is what they want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Really, really curious. I just look for interesting people. I mean, I know that's very hard to kind of quantify,
Yeah.
But that's just the way that we do it. I look for a lot of diversity in terms of demographic diversity and academic backgrounds, geographic backgrounds, so that we have a real a wide perspective on the work that we do. And since coming to Penn and being in Wharton as well, it's been really fun and gratifying to bring students into the lab and into projects who would not otherwise be doing lab work. So like MBA students, coming and working in the lab. And the goal there isn't to create a neuroscience, an MBA student who's going to go out and do neuroscience necessarily, but to give them enough of a flavor and an understanding of what's involved so that when they go out and they go back to doing whatever they're doing, they become a CEO, whatever, that they'll carry that with them and they'll have that knowledge.
Yeah. What I was going to ask, considering that Penn's fall semester is going to be very weird, how will that labs be operating? Will it be in person, online? Not at all.
We are in operation. There is a lot of uncertainty. Everything has been dynamic. The situation changing all the time. I think in June we really thought things would be very much under control and it would be relatively straightforward. That said, Philadelphia's flattened the curve very well, and I think that the university has a good set of protocols for moving research forward. Research with animals and other kind of wet lab stuff has, that's gone, back online. People have been doing that here for actually a couple of months.
Mm-hmm.
We're sort of in phase 2, I think, of research. A lot of our work has moved online, so we've been able to do research, although not the kinds of research that we would normally be doing in the lab. I mean, we're hopeful we'll be able to begin bringing in human participants for in-person experiments, but we're just not sure. So it's like we want to be very safe. Everybody wants to get back to research, but we want to do things, in the right way.
Yeah, totally understand.
And as the director of Platt Labs, can you describe some of your most notable projects which challenge questions in 21st century neuroscience?
That's asking. We should ask somebody else what they think are the ones that have been most challenging. I mean, I think we're really there's I think a few things that we're doing that are, I think, very novel. I mean, we have been really digging in and trying to understand the neuronal basis of how we think about the minds of other people or other agents, and that's a really difficult question to ask. And easier to ask in a human being, but difficult to get to the level of kind of what's going on at the neuronal level in the brain. And so for that reason, we also study these kinds of processes in monkeys, but then we have to develop ways not of asking them questions, but by relying on their behavior to understand kind of the degree to which they seem to be implementing a model of another individual's mind. And I think that we've done that and shown a great degree of sophistication in the way that they reason strategically and socially. And so we've made a lot of progress in the last few years at kind of pinning down what how neurons encode that information, and where in the brain that information seems to live, which is complements very nicely what we and others have observed in humans. So what that has done is to put us in a very nice position for kind of the next phase of research, and a big part of what the reason for a lot of things that we've been doing here is to push neuroscience out of the lab and into the real world. We've been doing that in human work by utilizing wearable devices, as well as developing our own brain monitoring devices that provide highly accurate measures of brain activity in people who are out doing things together, being active, whether that's rowing on a team or interacting in a theater, something like that. At the same time, we've also been working with a population of monkeys on an island off the coast of Puerto Rico for about 13 years. And that was a project that initially started out examining the sort of genetic underpinnings of social behavior and decision making, but has now expanded to include brain imaging, so that we've really been able to pinpoint differences in the anatomical structure of monkeys' brains that relate to how many friends they have, for example, or how high ranking they are. And those quite nicely parallel what has been seen in humans. And now we're in a really great position to begin to ask, how does that kind of baseline, how do those baseline differences in brain structure and function lead to the protective benefits that we know accrue to individuals who have strong social support following a disaster? So that island was hit by Hurricane Maria in 2017, and we've been able to examine monkeys before and after the hurricane. So that's another really exciting, very novel direction that our lab has been able to go in, and I can't think of another lab that has been doing anything quite like that. And what we're trying to do now is pull these strands together into an integrated whole.
So one of the things you mentioned, the wearable brain monitor that we call Cogwhere technology. We're looking a little bit into that. And something that I thought was interesting was comparison to, Fitbit for the brain.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about that project and your ultimate goal for that organization?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting time to be involved in a startup during, a massive recession induced by a pandemic, and so it's not for the faint of heart. But what? A couple of years ago, we had decided to. So essentially, we had tried out other wearable brain monitoring devices that were available on the market, and we did not find them up to the quality that, in terms of signals,
Hmm.
that we're used to obtaining in the laboratory. And so, we developed our own, which is based on novel sensor technology. And it turned out that we were able to get really, really nice high quality data in people who were moving about and engaging in activities, which is unusual. And so we went through the process with Penn in terms of commercializing and filing patent applications, and then decided to spin out this startup, Cogwhere. And the last 9 months has been a process of bringing on a CEO. I'm not the CEO. I don't want to run a company. I'm too busy as it is. And then developing a business strategy. And as I said before, that has been, we've had to do that on kind of a footing that's shifting quite literally, day to day. But I mean, ultimately, what we want to do is to empower people to understand their own minds, their own brains, and to use that information to reach peak performance. And so that could be athletic performance. We're very interested in that. It could be cognitive performance, could be work performance, on the job. And we're particularly interested in team performance. So how can we, and we have some strong hypotheses about how we can use the kind of data we can get from that system measured in multiple people at the same time to help them achieve, good team chemistry and achieve it much more quickly than they would otherwise.
Yeah.
And obviously, more on a personal note, since COVID-19 has put a halt on many research projects, have you picked up any new hobbies or any new passions of yours during quarantine?
Or old hobbies.
That's an interesting question. I don't think I've picked up any new hobbies. I mean, if anything, I feel like I've been busier by far than before the pandemic. It's actually quite challenging to run a lab remotely with 20 some people in it. I saw this coming pretty early on in January, so we moved all of our data online, made it very accessible by everyone, made sure they all had devices where they could become data scientists. And then actually this summer we took on, I think it was like 12 or 15 students remotely through a variety of different programs because so many internships and other opportunities had dried up.
Yeah.
And we said, okay, well, you're all going to come in as a cohort and we're going to develop a training program for you that you'll move through. So you're essentially, you will be within a month a sort of certified, Platt Labs brain science data analyst. And I think that was a really good experience for many people. A lot of people are still in the program, and it's been great because once they get to that level of capability, then they can, then they can be quite helpful to us too, because honestly, we're sitting on a backlog of data. We've been collecting data voraciously for the last few years. So anyway, that I have been super busy, but what have I been doing? Well, one thing that it has allowed me to do is I'm a fitness junkie and I work out a lot, but it's allowed me to do a lot more bike riding because I'm not commuting into work as frequently, so I can, go out and knock out an hour and a half or 2 hours early in the morning, on a long bike ride. So
Yeah.
I've been doing that maybe 3 days a week, which has been great.
Yeah, definitely. So one of the things I was curious about on a personal note is so Rahul and I were doing an internship at a community development financial institution.
Mhm.
So it really focuses on providing financial services to people that really don't have traditional access to them. And so how would you relate your neuroscience initiatives to helping, the less fortunate through the wealth gap and through these different
Yeah.
financial opportunities?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think that's a big, one of the things that we focus on a lot here in the Wharton Neuroscience Initiative are sort of the ethical, legal, and societal implications of applying neuroscience to business. And everybody worries about the sort of privacy and security and consent stuff, and that's really important. But I think one of the things that is critical and often overlooked is access. So if we're able to kind of give some people tools, through neuroscience that allow them to make better decisions, but only some people have access to that, others do not. That's only going to serve to widen the inequality that already exists. And so we need to find a way to make the work more accessible. It's really interesting that you guys are doing that. One of my former postdocs, who's a background both in economics and in neuroscience in my lab, just this summer took a job at a financial services startup as a behavioral neuroscientist who's doing exactly what you guys are doing. So it's basically a company that is devoted to helping people, especially people who have difficulty with a lot of financial decision making, to make better decisions. So I think that's a terrific thing to do. I think that one way, if we can understand the ways in which people get into traps and make poor decisions, right, and then perhaps we can help them out of that. I think understanding that some of those traps are not just sort of psychological rationalities, but they just reflect the way that our brains work and some of the limitations on them. And that can be hugely impactful. And in fact, we're working with a very large financial services company who's a corporate partner of Wharton Neuroscience to help them understand why people often begin to make poorer financial decisions as they get older. And so we made some really interesting discoveries about that. And ultimately, kind of the dream would be that through a very non-invasive, secure assessment of an individual as they're interacting, say, with the company's website, a really refined, accurate neuroscience based model could determine kind of where that individual sits in a space of like how many options they can handle and the time they need and how like loss averse they are, and essentially personalize the way information is presented to them in a way that helps them to make better decisions.
And I can only imagine the extent of that, even with like tying it in with AI and stuff. I feel like it could be incredibly powerful. So, UPenn has the CURF program and obviously Platt Labs as well. So I've been trying to think about, I did research in high school more on the STEM side than, like questioning things about finance and stuff. But, now that I'm going into this field, I really want to try to be like in that forward thinking mindset and, maybe pursuing a research project and that type of thing where you're trying to understand that those pitfalls they land into, that could be incredibly powerful to like any community development institution that's, trying to, service those people. So there's like a prevention side to it too.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think it's a great aspiration.
Yeah, thank you.
So we always end on the same question in our interview. What advice would you give to the current generation of high school students that would like to start the process to make a positive impact on society? And how would you recommend they start this process?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to imagine giving advice right now, given the state of the world. But I do think there are many, there are many ways that one can have a positive impact on society. I guess, maybe it's kind of like vote early and often, get involved, do things on a local level, while at the same time keeping your aspirations for, something that can be much bigger impact. I think that the kinds of things that you guys are doing, which was really, for your age, being, starting something up, and getting out and talking to people that you know whose work you admire, that, and then communicating that to other folks. That's a really powerful thing to do. I mean, I always, you know, I think that for me this worked, and so maybe that's why I'm kind of connected to this approach. But you know, I worry a lot about the specialization that is so often promoted, especially lately. You know, start doing STEM stuff or coding. I mean, you can always do coding, you should, but you know, get focused early on, and you know, keep your nose to the grindstone, and don't look up, and keep the blinders on, instead of kind of sampling very widely from many different disciplines, and kind of keeping your options open for a lot longer. I think you know, that's hard when you're, you know, especially if you're, you know, confronting paying off student loans, or you know, just financial security. But you know, life's long, and you know, for me, it was great to, you know, essentially, if you know, you count college and graduate school and postdoc, you know, that was whatever, that's 10, 15 years almost of exploration, which and then it didn't stop there, of course, but I've never been very good at staying in my lane. So you know, so I don't know. I would say that's something I would advise, and something that goes along with that, which is that one of the most important things that any person has to do in their life to be successful is to be able to communicate.
Yeah.
Be able to communicate in writing, to be able to communicate orally, and the path to doing that is it involves, I think, reading widely, not just narrowly within your discipline, but reading all kinds of things. You know, great books, read fiction, you know, essays, etc., and then take every opportunity you can to actually communicate, whether writing or doing what you're doing now, which is speaking to people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, this has been, you know, a huge learning experience. So, you know, talking to you is giving me, I think, like another idea to follow up on later in college, probably.